Block 1. The Origins of Stoicism. Zeno's Vision and the Ancient Foundations, gentle Mediterranean ambient sounds fading in. The story of Stoicism begins not with a grand declaration or a planned philosophical revolution, but with a shipwreck. Around 300 BCE, a Phoenician merchant named Zeno of Citium was sailing with a cargo of purple dye, a luxury item in the ancient world, when his ship was destroyed near the coast of Athens. Having lost everything, Zeno wandered into a bookshop in the Athenian agora, where he happened upon the writings of Socrates. This chance encounter would change not only the course of Zeno's life, but would eventually influence thousands of years of human thought. Sounds transitioned to soft instrumental music with Greek elements. Imagine Athens in the 3rd century BCE, a city still gleaming with intellectual energy, despite having passed its political prime. The schools of Plato and Aristotle were well established, and various philosophical traditions competed for followers in the bustling marketplaces and under the shade of olive trees. It was in this vibrant intellectual landscape that Zeno, the shipwrecked merchant turned philosophy student, began to develop his own school of thought. After studying with various philosophers, including the Cynic and members of the Megarian and academic schools, Zeno began teaching at the Stoa Poikile, the painted porch, a colonnade decorated with murals depicting Athenian victories. It was from this location that his philosophy would derive its name, Stoicism. Music shifts to a more contemplative tone. But what was it about Zeno's teachings that would eventually captivate minds from ancient Greece to modern boardrooms and therapy sessions? At its core, early Stoicism was a practical philosophy centered on a radical proposition that virtue alone is sufficient for happiness. External circumstances, wealth, health, reputation, even life itself were deemed indifferent in the ultimate calculation of a good life. Zeno taught that the universe is governed by a divine rationality, the logos, and that humans, possessing reason, could align themselves with this cosmic order. This alignment wasn't just an intellectual exercise, but required disciplined practice in controlling emotions, accepting what cannot be changed, and focusing only on what lies within our power. Brief pause with subtle ambient sounds. The early Stoics divided philosophy into 3 interconnected parts: logic, physics, and ethics. Logic provided the tools for clear thinking and discernment of truth. Physics, which for the Stoics included what we would now call metaphysics and natural science, explained the nature of reality and our place within it. Ethics, building upon this foundation, prescribed how to live in accordance with nature and reason. Music subtly intensifies after Zeno's death around 262 BCE. The leadership of the Stoic school passed to Cleanthes of Assos, a former boxer who supported himself by working as a water carrier while studying philosophy. Though not as intellectually brilliant as Zeno, Cleanthes' dedication to Stoic principles was unwavering. His Hymn to Zeus remains one of the most beautiful expressions of early Stoic theology, portraying the divine as the rational principle permeating all of existence. But it was Chrysippus of Soli who truly systematized Stoicism. Often called the second founder of the philosophy, this prolific writer, said to have authored over 700 works, now sadly lost except for fragments, defended Stoic doctrines against critics and refined its logical foundations. Without Chrysippus, there would be no Stoa, became a common saying, reflecting his crucial role in establishing Stoicism as a comprehensive philosophical system. Music transitions to a bridge with subtle percussion. During this early period, Stoicism distinguished itself from competing schools through several key doctrines. Unlike the Epicureans, who sought tranquility through withdrawal and pleasure, the Stoics embraced social engagement and defined the good life in terms of virtue rather than pleasure. Unlike the skeptics, they believed certain knowledge was possible. And unlike the Peripatetics followers of Aristotle, they rejected external goods as necessary components of happiness. The early Stoics also developed distinctive psychological theories, including the controversial claim that emotions are actually judgments, cognitive assessments that can be corrected through rational examination. This insight would later influence cognitive approaches to psychology thousands of years later. Music fades to background. As we embark on this journey through Stoic thought, from its origins to its modern applications, we'll witness how a philosophy born in the aftermath of personal disaster would evolve through Roman pragmatism, medieval preservation, Renaissance rediscovery, and eventually modern revival. We'll explore how core Stoic principles have remained remarkably consistent even as their expression and application have adapted to changing times and cultures. The story of Stoicism is more than an academic exercise in the history of ideas. It's a testament to the enduring human search for meaning, resilience, and ethical clarity in an unpredictable world. From Zeno's painted porch to today's digital forums, the Stoic conversation continues, and we're about to join it. Music gently. Block 2. Roman Stoicism. From Greek theory to practical wisdom, music transitions from Greek-inspired themes to Roman-influenced instrumentation. While Zeno's shipwreck brought Stoicism into existence, it would be the expansion of Roman power that would carry these ideas beyond Athens and transform them into one of history's most influential philosophical traditions. As we move from the painted porches of Athens to the marble halls of Rome, we witness not just a geographical shift, but an evolution in how Stoic principles were understood and applied. Sounds of bustling Roman forum fade in briefly. By the 2nd century BCE, Rome had conquered Greece militarily, but Greece was conquering Rome culturally. Greek tutors, artists, and philosophers flowed into the expanding republic, bringing with them the intellectual treasures of Hellenic civilization. Among these treasures was Stoicism, which found fertile ground among the Roman elite who recognized in its emphasis on duty, virtue, and self-discipline an affinity with traditional Roman values. Music shifts to a more solemn, contemplative tone. The first significant Roman Stoic was Aetius of Rhodes, who adapted Greek Stoicism for his Roman audience. Where the early Greek Stoics had sometimes embraced paradoxical and uncompromising positions, Aetius offered a more moderate approach. He emphasized the development of appropriate social roles and duties, the concept of personae, that would deeply influence Cicero's understanding of ethics. Under Aetius, Stoicism began to shed some of its more austere aspects, while retaining its core commitment to virtue as the supreme good. His student, Posidonius, further developed Stoicism by integrating elements of Platonic and Aristotelian thought, particularly regarding psychology. Where earlier Stoics had insisted that emotions were simply faulty judgments, Posidonius recognized non-rational elements in human psychology that required more than just intellectual correction. This more nuanced view of human nature would influence how later Stoics approached the practical work of ethical development, brief ambient sounds of pen on papyrus. It was through Cicero, though not himself a committed Stoic, that many Stoic ideas were preserved and transmitted. His works on duties, on the nature of the gods, and Tusculan disputations presented Stoic arguments alongside those of other schools, often favoring a moderate position that incorporated Stoic ethics while rejecting some of their more controversial metaphysical claims. Cicero's elegant Latin prose would ensure that Stoic ideas remained accessible even when knowledge of Greek declined in the Western Roman Empire. Music becomes more intimate, reflective, but it is with Seneca the Younger that we encounter the first of the great Roman Stoic voices that still speak directly to us today. Born in Cordoba around 4 BCE and dying by forced suicide in 65 CE, Seneca lived a life of dramatic contrasts. A wealthy statesman and tutor to Emperor Nero, he wrote eloquently about simplicity and virtue while navigating the treacherous waters of Roman imperial politics. In his Moral Letters to Lucilius, Dialogues and Essays, Seneca addressed the challenges of living virtuously in a corrupt world. Unlike the systematic treatises of earlier Stoics, Seneca's writings are intimate and personal, offering practical advice for dealing with anger, grief, the fear of death, and the burdens of wealth. "We suffer more in imagination than in reality," he famously observed, anticipating modern cognitive approaches to anxiety by 2 millennia. Subtle sounds of military camp briefly fade in. If Seneca brought Stoicism into the senator's study, Epictetus carried it into far humbler settings. Born a slave around 55 CE and crippled either by abuse or disease, Epictetus gained his freedom and became one of history's most influential philosophical teachers. His student Arrian compiled his teachings into the Discourses and the more concise Enchiridion, or handbook works, that would later comfort prisoners of war and inspire modern psychological therapies. Music becomes more determined. Purposeful Epictetus distilled Stoicism to its practical essence with his doctrine of the dichotomy of control. Some things are within our power, while others are not. This simple distinction, focusing exclusively on what we can control and accepting what we cannot, forms the cornerstone of his therapeutic approach. For Epictetus, philosophy was not primarily about constructing abstract theories, but about transforming lives. Don't explain your philosophy, embody it. Sounds of imperial court briefly fade in and out. The journey of Stoicism reaches its most renowned voice with Emperor Marcus Aurelius, whose private journal, later published as Meditations, offers a window into the mind of a philosopher king struggling to maintain his principles amid the pressures of ruling an empire. Writing by lamplight in military camps along the Danube frontier around 170 to 180 CE, Marcus reminded himself of Stoic precepts as a form of spiritual exercise. Music becomes more introspective. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength, Marcus wrote, echoing Epictetus while applying these principles to his own unique circumstances. The Meditations reveal a deeply humane ruler working to overcome irritation with his courtiers, fear of death, and the temptations of power through Stoic practices of self-examination and cosmic perspective. With these three Roman Stoics, Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius, we see Stoicism transformed from an abstract philosophical system into a lived practice accessible to people of widely different social stations. The Roman Stoics emphasized practical ethics over theoretical physics and logic, though they remained grounded in the fundamental Stoic view of a rational, providential cosmos and the unique human capacity to live in accordance with nature through reason. Music gradually shifts to a more somber tone, yet even as Stoicism reached its most eloquent expressions, the world that had nurtured it was changing. The Pax Romana was giving way to the crisis of the 3rd century. New religious movements, particularly Christianity, were offering alternative paths to meaning and consolation. The philosophical schools of Athens and Rome were gradually closing as imperial patronage shifted. As we'll see in our next chapter, Stoicism would not die with the ancient world, but it would enter a period of transmission and transformation as its texts